Good morning, colleagues. Calling this meeting to order. Happy Thursday, a short week this week, so hope you get back to your communities safe and sound to reconnect today or tomorrow. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. Welcome to meeting 4 of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Welcome to new member today, Dean Allison. Great to see you, Mr. Allison, and good to see some of you back, Mr. Rowe and others. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we continue, I would ask that all in-person participants consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, especially our amazing interpreters. You will also notice a QR code on the card, which links to a short awareness video. Just a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. We have one person on Zoom today, and for our participant on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And for members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding, and particularly for our Zoom friends, do put your hand up when you would like to address us, and the clerk will give me an elbow because sometimes we're not looking at the screen. So pursuant to, I should go to the travel now? Or? Yeah, okay. Colleagues, we have a bit of business that we have to do, and we have to do it in public. You will recall that we have discussed travel on this important critical minerals study to get down to the front to see what's happening on the ground. We had agreement at the last meeting, but given that the break week coming up has really come upon us, we don't have the appropriate approvals. The proposal is, Madam Clerk, is to put that off to the following break week, which is Remembrance Week, but of course Remembrance Day is the 11th. The rest of the week we will be in our communities or elsewhere. And Madam Clerk, I understand we need a motion to change.
If there's discussion before.
Yes, yes.
If they want to discuss, Mr. Smith.
Yes. So just to finish my sentence, I believe after some discussion, we will need a motion just to refer this back to the clerk to work out the logistics, and I know they will be open to our feedback. Wait. And we'll just ask for the witnesses' patience for now, but we will get to you very, very shortly, and you can see how the sausage is made, as they say. Monsieur Simon.
Désolé, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I am very pleased with your work, but I think that we should put it off until the second hour. I would like to hear the witnesses right away, and perhaps we could address this committee business meeting at the end. I think we have good consensus, so I don't think it will take much time, and if it's not of highest concern for you, I would like to hear the witnesses immediately.
Dealt with this, but if it's the will of the committee, so be it.
Yes, I would agree with Mario's position on this full-heartedly. The Conservatives support it.
One of the issues is the liaison committee at 1:30, though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Colleagues, there is, the liaison committee meets at 1:30, and
OK, je comprends.
so we wanted to give them some notice, some opportunity.
Okay, I understand.
A rather simple matter, but
On s'est déjà parlé. Est-ce qu'on peut faire ça très vite?
Okay,
Je pense-
so we've already discussed this. Could we do this really quickly? We have so little time. We wanted to ensure that that visit be approved, but in a non-parliamentary week, it's more simple for anyone and all of us. So there is consensus to putting it off to the next break week, and we could do this really quickly.
Monsieur Gay.
Je suis d'accord.
I agree. In as much as that we don't travel on a Ramadan or any other special holiday. You mentioned Remembrance Day. We can't be traveling on Remembrance Day.
If I could, I think I'm feeling the will of the room that we refer this to the clerk, that it be put back to the following break week, that we will be taking input from you, from your whips, and from all of those who are involved to put together a proper travel budget. And we want this trip to be successful. So I'll just ask, do I need a motion? I need a motion. Yes. Yeah. So, Monsieur Gay, you move that this be forwarded to the clerk.
I do.
And that the parties can
That
give
we
input.
consider the next sitting week.
Okay.
And the next non-sitting week, sorry. Sorry, Mario.
Yeah.
Excusez, l'autre semaine, on est en chambre, hein, c'est bien ça? Dans la
But the
semaine?
other week we are in chamber, yes? So that's in November, rather. Okay, thank you.
Do you need a crisp motion? Or? No. You're good. Okay. I think the clerk has determined the will of the room, and we will get to our witnesses. Thank you for joining us, everyone, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Thursday, September 18th. The committee resume its study of development of critical minerals in Canada, and we welcome our witnesses. We have David Cataford, Chief Executive Officer of Campion Iron. Welcome, David. John Mullally, Head of External Relations and Social Performance, Newmont Corporation. Chad Ulansky, President and CEO of Cantex Mine Development Corp. And on Zoom, Sandeep Singh, President and Chief Executive Officer, Western Copper and Gold. You will each have 5 minutes or less for your opening remarks. And we'll start with you, Mr. Cataford. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, members of the committee, merci de me recevoir aujourd'hui.
Thank you for having me here today, Mr. Chairman.
To the border of Quebec and Labrador, home to one of Canada's most developed mining regions, the Labrador Trough. This region holds some of the purest iron ore in the world, now recognized on Canada's critical mineral list for its strategic role in decarbonizing the steel industry. Et grâce à l'énergie hydroélectrique, nous y
And
produisons
thanks to
un
hydroelectric power, we produce high-purity iron ore concentrate with one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world.
of resources. The trough has tremendous long-term potential with current operations and projects that could progress rapidly, such as our Kami project. Despite these advantages, a gap has developed between Canada's share of the global iron ore market and that of other producing countries, such as Australia. While Australia's resources are lower in quality, it has heavily invested in its iron ore sector, generating $20 billion annually in taxes and royalties over the past decade. Nous croyons que le FER doit agir maintenant.
We believe that Canada must act now to unlock the full potential of its high-purity iron ore industry. Given the scale and quality of this rare resource, we have a duty to develop and promote it in an intelligent manner. This industry can thrive for generations, but the biggest challenge remains getting new mining projects off the ground.
Case in point. In 2014, we founded the company with the vision of developing high-purity iron ore projects in the Labrador Trough. We were a small team of 3. We restarted operations at the Bloom Lake mine site in 2018. Since then, we've doubled our production. We did it during a global pandemic, on time and on budget. Today, we're more than 1,300 employees and are still growing responsibly and sustainably. This growth was made possible through creative partnerships. Examples include federal investment in the Port of Sept-Îles in 2014 and Quebec's acquisition of the Pointe-Noire assets, in which we are also financial partners. Nous sommes fiers de compter le gouvernement du Québec
We are
parmi
proud to count the Government of Quebec among our major shareholders and to have generated one of the highest returns for Quebec taxpayers. Since 2018, we've invested nearly $2 billion in the Labrador Trough and paid nearly $1 billion in taxes and royalties to the governments of Quebec and Canada. Our host communities, Vermont and Western Labrador, have long played a central role in the Canadian mining sector. Their residents have decades of expertise in the iron ore industry and contribute significantly to local and national economic development. We have strong partnerships with Indigenous communities based on mutual respect and trust.
for a unique opportunity to fully unlock the Labrador Trough's potential. And to seize it, we must establish a critical minerals corridor which requires strategic investments in infrastructure in the region. 3 major infrastructure projects need to be developed in the Trough. A new transmission line needs to be built between Churchill Falls and Labrador West. This is essential for the CAMI project to proceed and to foster development in the community. Investments in the Société Ferroviaire et Portuaire de Pointe-Noire are required to continue growing the port of Sept-Îles, the second largest port in Canada, largely due to high-grade iron ore. We have the opportunity to complete the rail loop in the Labrador Trough, which would allow continuous train circulation and significantly boost capacity and efficiency. These infrastructure investments will enable our CAMI project, which represents a $4 billion investment to create more than 600 quality jobs in the region. We recently formed a partnership with Nippon Steel and Sojitz for the development of the CAMI project. Ce partenariat avec des leaders mondiaux japonais de l'industrie de
This
l'acier
partnership with Japanese global leaders in the steel industry demonstrate the exceptional quality of the Trough's resources and the region's proven ability to sustainably develop large-scale iron ore projects.
investment decision, our vision remains to develop a nation-building project. CAMI supports the decarbonization of the global steel industry. It is backed by strategic partners and led by Champion Iron, a company with a proven track record, having delivered multi-billion-dollar projects on time and on budget. Has the potential to generate benefits for decades to come for our partners, communities, and governments, and could be ready for rapid implementation following a final investment decision. In a time of economic uncertainty, investing in infrastructure supporting high-purity iron ore projects in the Labrador Trough is key to diversifying markets, increasing exports, and creating wealth at home. Encore une fois, merci pour votre invitation.
Once again, thank you for your invitation.
Mr. Cataford, right on time, appreciated by the committee. Our next witness, John Mullally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Good afternoon.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm the head of External Relations Social Performance for Newmont in Canada. It's an honor to present to you today. Canada, like the world, finds itself at a watershed moment. Global economic uncertainties and geopolitical tensions are reshaping how nations think about resource security and supply chains. Gold prices are at record highs, driven by central bank buying, and copper faces mounting strain as demand for electrification and storage outpaces new discoveries. These dynamics create an extraordinary opportunity for Canada, and in this case, particularly northwestern British Columbia. Newmont believes that this region is a world-class mining district. We're committed to shaping its future in partnership with Indigenous nations, government, and industry. For those less familiar with Newmont, we've operated for over 100 years with a long-term perspective in an industry prone to short-term cycles. Our strategy is simple: to be the world's best gold company while diversifying into copper, the key commodity of the next supercycle. That strategy is already taking shape here in Canada. In 2023, our acquisition of Newcrest added the Brucejack and Red Chris mines to our Canadian portfolio. We also hold 50% of Galore Creek, Canada's largest undeveloped copper deposit, in partnership with Teck Resources. Together, these assets position us in a region that holds most of Canada's copper resources, along with significant gold, silver, and critical minerals essential to batteries, steelmaking, and semiconductors. What makes the region unique is not only geology, but also its people. The Tahltan and Nisga'a nations bring stewardship of the land, business acumen, and vision. Our partnership with the Tahltan Nation at Red Chris is one of the largest, is proof of shared decision-making and what that governance can deliver. Red Chris is one of Canada's largest copper mines with about $600 million in annual supplier spend and more than $100 million of which is with the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation. Together, we are advancing a technically complex block cave that could extend the mine's life by at least 13 years and increase Canada's copper output by more than 15%. This project is advancing under a consent-based decision-making process between the Tahltan Nation and the province of BC. The decision is expected to take place in early 2026. It represents the model of participation we believe in and partnership we believe in that should guide Canada's mining future. Newmont's commitment to Canada remains steadfast, but unlocking the region's true potential requires targeted action that I would highlight in 4 key areas. First, infrastructure investment. There are good examples in northwestern British Columbia, such as the Dease Lake Airport and the Port of Stewart that was recently acquired by the Nisga'a and Tahltan, financed by Newmont, and Highway 37 upgrades that the Natural Resources Canada invested $70 million in from the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund. But much more is needed. Federal investment in roads and transmission upgrades are essential to meet future power demand. The proposed North Coast transmission line would unlock critical mineral potential with Indigenous leadership right at the center. Second, in terms of governance and working with our Indigenous partners, we've seen that shared decision-making does work. Our experience at Red Chris shows that these frameworks, when Indigenous nations are resourced properly and to participate meaningfully in permitting and governance. So federal support for these types of agreements will ensure that Indigenous leaders are front and center in building long-term prosperity in the region. Specifically, we recommend that the federal government join the province of British Columbia and the Tahltan Nation in what they're referring to as their foundation agreement. Third, talent and training. A strong pipeline of skilled workers is critical. We need to work with Indigenous nations, government, and institutions to expand trades and mining-specific training. Hub and spoke training centers of excellence in the Northwest would help ensure local communities, especially Indigenous youth, are positioned to take on the high-skilled jobs this industry demands. And finally, federal tax policy. The Clean Technology Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit must recognize copper's critical role. So lowering the critical mineral content threshold from 90 to 50% and including brownfield expansions would make the program directly applicable to copper gold projects in northwestern British Columbia and thus unlocking significant investment, which would also level the playing field with competing jurisdictions. In northwestern British Columbia, Canada really has a chance to responsibly unlock critical minerals, many operations that are already producing minerals at this time, to attract additional incremental investment, many billions of dollars worth of investment opportunities, advance reconciliation, and protect communities and culture. This is more than an economic opportunity. It is proof that responsible development, Indigenous participation, and environmental stewardship can coexist and thrive. Newmont's committed to being a catalyst for that transformation. And merci encore une fois. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Mr. Mullally, and on to you, Mr. Olansky.
Thank you to the committee for the invitation to present today. I'm the President and CEO of Cantex Mine Development Corp. We're a junior exploration company with a project in central Yukon, where we've discovered mineralization which is rich in the critical metals, zinc and germanium. The perspective that I bring today is that of a junior explorer. The market capitalizations of junior explorers are relatively insignificant compared to the majors. We find nearly all of the mines in Canada, and as such, we're the foundation of the mining industry. As I'm sure you're aware, mining is one of the pillars of our economy. It's ranked third at the moment, produces about $160 billion a year towards our GDP. And due to a number of coinciding global events, whether it's society's green transition, geopolitical tensions with China, armed conflicts around the world, and a strained economic relationship with our neighbor to the south, mining in Canada has found itself back in focus. Many are looking to mining to increase its activities to generate more jobs, more tax revenue, and more direct and indirect economic opportunities. A growing number of people, both here and abroad, are realizing that Canada has a wealth of critical metals that could be a reliable, friendly source that operates at the highest environmental, social, and governmental standards. This is a situation that we find ourselves in, with broad domestic support for advancing critical metal projects and international allies eager for our resources. However, I feel that there is a very real chance that we will miss this opportunity. While there are numerous factors that put this opportunity in jeopardy, there are several which I believe that could be alleviated through the actions of government. These fall into four broad categories: financing and investment. From a junior perspective, we have small market capitalizations, typically in the tens of millions of dollars, and we do not have producing assets. As such, we're reliant on capital markets to fund our work. These capital markets have not been reliable, and there's often a shortage of capital available for the exploration and development of our projects. And in fact, capital investment in mining was lower in 2024 than it was 12 years earlier in 2012. And that's in spite of 33% inflation over that period. I believe that the government should continue to incentivize investment through the continuation of the critical metal and mineral exploration tax credits. It's been a fantastic program. However, I believe that the government can do more. I would like to see that some of our pension funds domestically invest more back into Canada. The second item is regulations and permitting. At the outset, I'd like to say that I'm in favor of responsible mining. I live in Canada. My family lives here. I've got a strong vested interest in ensuring that we uphold the strongest environmental regulations. However, the ever-lengthening time that is required to obtain the permits necessary to do everything from low-level exploration right through to mine development are a real hindrance to our industry. Commodity prices are cyclical, investment has a short-term focus, and the geopolitical environment is rapidly changing. We can't spend 10 years or longer waiting for permits to put projects into production. The credibility of the Canadian mining sector is tarnished due to the glacial pace of our permitting system. Finally, on the First Nation front, I'm concerned that the at times strained relationship with the First Nations, though there are shining examples of First Nations taking a lead role in mining, such as the Tahltan and the Osoyoos First Nations in British Columbia, the Cree of Northern Quebec. There are many First Nations that have yet to benefit and to become involved. With the continued recognition of the First Nations' right to free, prior, and informed consent, both government and industry need to ensure that we have an open and trustworthy relationship with First Nations and are able to offer them a real interest in having resources developed in their traditional territories. And finally, infrastructure. Most of Canada is undeveloped. It's uninhabited. Our resources are much more likely to be found in a place with no infrastructure than next to civilization. As such, we need the government's assistance in connecting these deposits to infrastructure, both power and roads. Without infrastructure, they can't be developed. And in summary, I'd like to reiterate my belief in the potential for mining critical metals in Canada. We have a rich endowment, an ever-expanding endowment due to the hard work of a skilled workforce from coast to coast to coast. Our nation has turned to us to become a stronger pillar of our economy in these difficult times. Equally, our allies around the world are turning to us to see whether we can supply the strategic critical metals that they've historically sourced from countries such as Russia and China, who are now withholding these metals for competitive and military gain. However, as mentioned, there are a number of challenges. I believe the Government of Canada continue to expand its leadership in overcoming these obstacles and making the most of this generational opportunity for the benefit of the Canadian mining industry and all Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Ilansky. And now we'll go to Zoom and Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh for 6 minutes. Sorry, 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't, please let me know. And I apologize for the what appears to be a disco light above my head. I assure you it is not. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for the invitation to appear today. Sandeep Singh, President and CEO of Western Copper and Gold. I've spent my entire career in mining, and I will start by saying that I'm genuinely encouraged by what I'm seeing at the moment. The conversations that we're having around mining, they have shifted. And I think as a society, we're recognizing its vital role in Canada's future. The government, I'll also mention, has taken important steps with the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund in particular and the Major Projects Office that's just started off. And I'm pleased to see the government at all levels, including this committee, continuing to reconfirm that commitment.
I look forward to sharing some perspectives from our experience of advancing the casino project in the Yukon, Canada's largest critical minerals project by annual revenue. Casino is a great example of how critical minerals development can serve multiple national priorities, providing substantial economic benefits, strengthening domestic supply chains, underpinning transformational infrastructure investments, and bolstering Arctic sovereignty.
Race for critical minerals, and I regret to say that the West is behind. Countries are investing enormous sums in securing supply. The one thing that is positive for Canada, or the one thing that Canada has that money cannot buy unless we allow it to, is that we have the mineral endowment itself. We have the resources the world needs. We have the talent required to extract them sustainably. The question isn't whether we can compete, it's whether we can execute, and whether we can move fast enough to capitalize on our innate advantages and rise up to the moment. Our project, the Casino Project in the Yukon, demonstrates what's possible when geology, partnerships, and policy align. The economic impact of our project is profound. Over its phase one 27-year mine life, Casino would contribute nearly $61 billion to Canada's GDP, including $51 billion directly in the Yukon, and deliver $19 billion in tax and royalty revenues based on conservative consensus long-term commodity prices. As a result, the project has attracted multiple equity investments from Rio Tinto and Mitsubishi Materials, world-class copper groups based in allied G7 countries. The mineral contribution is equally significant. Casino holds just over 5 billion pounds of copper reserves, the third largest in North America, and at 241 million pounds annually, Casino alone could increase Canada's national copper production by more than 15%. For molybdenum, Casino holds the largest reserve in North America, with the potential to increase Canada's output fivefold. The significant gold content, over 10 million ounces in reserves, makes the project incredibly resilient for future cyclical downturns in critical minerals. This is a generational mine once permitted and built. The Yukon and Canada's north have demonstrated exceptional geological potential. The Yukon has 27 out of 34 metals on the critical minerals list in 2025, yet the region remains vastly underexplored compared to southern jurisdictions. The primary reason is lack of infrastructure. The solution is dual-use infrastructure that serves both industry and communities. In our case, Casino requires 130 megawatts of power to become that generational mine. Yukon's isolated grid relies on rental diesel generators to keep up with the current demand and cannot support this additional load, obviously. Our plan is to produce power at site using LNG, which is our base case in the current environment, but the proposed BC grid, or BC Yukon Grid Connect, already supported with $40 million in federal CMIF funding, I should mention, would enable Casino to run on clean hydroelectric power while transforming energy access in the region. I am pleased to relay and suggest that the BC Yukon Grid Connect has the support of the BC and the Yukon governments, as well as First Nations on both sides, and that the proposal appears to be on the short list of projects being considered by the Major Projects Office, at least based on news reports. We believe our project and the Grid Connect are symbiotic, as without projects like ours as off-takers, it is difficult to justify the infrastructure investment that helps all Yukoners and bolsters Arctic security. Le développement des minéraux critiques peut seulement réussir.
Critical minerals development only succeeds in partnership with Indigenous communities. At Casino, we've prioritized relationships with affected Yukon First Nations. We've signed cooperation agreements, conducted collaborative environmental and traditional knowledge studies, and provided millions in funding to support First Nation participation in the assessment process.
Major projects in the North face complex tripartite assessment processes involving federal, territorial, and Indigenous decision makers. Success requires proactive federal coordination to prevent delays from departmental silos, timely Crown consultation with First Nations, a clear focus on assessment mandates, and adequate resourcing for both assessment bodies and Indigenous participation. Projects like Casino, major by any standard, not just northern standards, would benefit from robust federal coordination mechanisms that ensure appropriate attention and drive accountability across departments. Monsieur le Président, membres du comité.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Canada's critical minerals opportunity is real. Casino represents the type of critical minerals project that Canada needs, one that brings infrastructure north, strengthens supply chains, and drives sustained northern prosperity. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our witnesses for those excellent presentations. We have a lot of time with you this morning. I think we're going to have about an hour and a half or so. So we'll now turn it over to members for questions. The first round is 6 minutes each, and we're going to start with Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I've got a series of questions here for Mr. Lulanski. What specific regulations keep your projects stuck in red tape instead of shovels in the ground?
So we face at our stage of exploration a number of delays that's largely related to permits for our drilling operations, establishing remote infrastructure, so airstrips and such, and those tend to take at the moment years in order to work through the system, through the SAB system in the Yukon. So it can take us a couple of years to get through a permit to drill or build an airstrip and such. So it's very time consuming as compared to other jurisdictions.
And with your history of spanning decades, has it gotten worse in the last 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I was involved with the discovery of Ekati, the diamond mine in the NWT, quite a long time ago. And a quick timeline on Ekati, our first drill hole into Kimberlite was late in 91. We started permitting in 94. Our last permits were available in 96, and we went into production in 98. And that was a tier 1 world-class mine. I can't permit, drill holes as fast as it took to permit that entire mine in the NWT. Granted, it's a different time, but that's a demonstration of how long our permitting is presently taking in Canada.
We know all the regulations the Liberals have brought in and the red tape that layered on your sector, especially in the north, where it's so important to have those private sector jobs for another witness has referenced the dual purposes, but also we should keep in mind of military and defense reasons that having that infrastructure in the north is beneficial. Not having it and not having those jobs makes Canada less safe and less productive. Given Canada's vast critical mineral deposits, do you believe Liberal laws such as C-69 delay projects, cost jobs, and block investments in Canada?
Yeah, I believe that the intent was there to try and streamline the permitting process and speed things up. But I think
But your example you just gave would prove the opposite, right?
And there was a but. But the fact that federally they're starting to overreach into provincial and territorial approvals and expanding the requirements for approvals for those permits has demonstrated, unfortunately, that time frame is expanding rather than being reduced at the moment. I wish that every project that had commercial viability across the country was fast-tracked rather than a select few. That would be...
And that's what we've heard from the Supreme Court. It's unconstitutional and it infringes on the provincial responsibilities. But ultimately, would repealing the anti-development law C-69 increase projects and increase the speed at which projects would get off the ground?
Yeah, it would, and I'd like to see further changes along the same line to reduce the complexity of the permitting system. I mean, I'm not looking to try and reduce the oversight on the environmental impact at all, but I think it can be streamlined, get rid of that duplication, both federally, provincially, but also within the different ministries, provincially or territorially. When we permit, we get the same questions from various ministries over and over and over again. It would be nice to have a single window approach to our permitting to try and speed things up.
That's what the courts have ruled, but we're still waiting for the Liberal government to fix the problems with that bill. Your company operates, interesting, if I read right, is in both Canada and in the States. And it takes 38% longer to build a mine in Canada, while the U.S. approvals can happen as early as within 28 days if it's on federal land. What other differences do you see between the approval process in the States versus Canada?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, on the federal lands, there's a 28-day period that the present government there has deemed is the turnaround time for permits. It would be wonderful if we had something similar in Canada, but we don't. But yeah, on the whole, they're several years faster to permitting in the States than Canada. And for the multinational countries around the world that are looking to invest, when you've got two projects that have, fairly similar attributes, the time it takes to production makes a significant difference, and those dollars will flow to other countries before they come to Canada. And that, unfortunately, is the situation at the moment, that we are losing global investment as a result of how long it takes to put our resources into production.
Have you seen also Canadian investment not investing in Canada? We have pension funds that don't do this, and other private industries. Like, is it tightening up? Even Canadians have given up on investing in Canada?
Yeah, it's one of the things that strikes me is that our Canadian pension funds were like the Maple 8, the 8 largest pension funds in Canada, cumulatively invest around $2.4 trillion. And of that, I guess prior to 1990, there was legislation in place that they had to invest about 90% of their funds domestically in Canada. And then that was reduced through to 2005 when all requirements were lifted. And they've gone from 90% being invested within Canada down to about 25% invested in Canada. So there's about $1.8 trillion that's invested elsewhere around the world. They invest more in China than they do in Canada. And I'm not saying that we should go back to 90%. And I'm also not saying that they should be investing in junior exploration companies. We're pretty small. But to the mid-tier and large-tier companies that are Canadian-based, it would be wonderful to have that money come back into the mining sector and into the broader Canadian economy.
Yeah.
And that investment would filter down to many jobs within Canada, and it would also strengthen, in particular, our mining industry. Our mining industry has been hollowed out since then. We've lost Inco, we've lost Falcon Bridge.
Thanks, Mr. Alansky. We're going to go on to, and thank you, Mr. Tucker. We're going to go on to Mr. Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a representative from Hamilton, I'm primarily interested in Mr. Cataford and iron ore, so my questions are going to be primarily for him. I'm asking nonpartisan questions because I'm interested in your expert opinion as witnesses. So you spoke about the economic potential of the Labrador Trough and fully developing that resource, and you gave the comparison to Australia, having invested in their iron ore mining industry, $20 billion. So just to start big picture, what potential is there if that resource was to be fully developed to reach its full potential?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So if we look at today, Canada has roughly about 80 billion tons of known resources, and we produce roughly about 50 million tons per year. We've got an opportunity to be able to develop infrastructure in a very creative way that would allow us to double the current production in a short time frame. So go from 50 million tons to about 100 million tons in a short time frame. So that would allow us to double the current revenues that we produce in the region for very limited investments compared to typical infrastructure investments.
Thank you. And I'm interested into digging into where your customer base is, noting that Nippon Steel from Japan is one of your potential investors, part of your customer base. And I believe Australia sells mostly to China, and Japan is similar region. So if this resource was to be further developed, where would that ore be shipped, and where would the customers primarily be buying?
Yeah, if we look at the current situation in terms of exports from Canada into the rest of the world, geographically, Asia is the worst potential market for us because it's the furthest away, it's the one that costs the most. When we started our project, we had about half of our tons that were delivered more in the Asian market and half of our tons closer to home in Canada, in Europe, and in the Middle East. We're currently investing $500 million of our own money to be able to develop a new plant, to upgrade our resource, which allows our clients to not only reduce their carbon footprint when they produce steel, but also to move most of our tons that are currently going to Asia to markets that are closer to home. So that's more into Canada, more into your region, into potentially Ontario, and also more in Europe and more in the Middle East.
Thank you. You mentioned carbon emissions and the decarbonization of the steel industry a few times as a priority for the industry and a key economic value add that I think that we bring in Canada. So I was hoping that you could maybe expand a little bit further on the relationship between the quality of ore that we produce in Canada and decarbonization of the steel industry.
So high level, if we look at the transformation of iron ore into steel, you have to essentially melt it. So if you're melting more contaminants, you're creating more CO2 emissions. So by having an extra pure material like we have here in the ground in Canada, this allows our customers to reduce significant amount of CO2 emissions. As an example, if you use the blast furnace technology, which is the main technology that's used to produce steel, by using our material, you can reduce CO2 emissions between 10 to 20%. When you go towards the electric arc furnace, well, then you can reduce CO2 emissions by 50% using our material. And it gets critical once you get towards electric arc furnaces, because once you've delivered that type of technology, you cannot buy lower grade iron ore. You need to buy high purity iron ore, and that's where we've got a unique opportunity here in Canada because we produce exclusively high grade iron ore.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on infrastructure. A number of witnesses, I think all of you actually, mentioned infrastructure as a barrier to development, specifically for the Labrador Trough. You mentioned transmission, the Septiel port, and rail connections. But open question to anyone that wants to answer. I'm trying to better understand the relationship between federal investment in infrastructure, provincial investment, and the responsibility of the private sector. So what incentive is there for taxpayers to be investing in infrastructure in order to make some of these projects economically viable?
So if you don't mind, I'll lead and I'll let my colleagues respond. But if you take Champion Iron as an example, if we go back to when we started the project, the federal government invested about $55 million in the port infrastructure to allow Sept-Îles to become the second largest port in Canada. The Quebec government invested also in the port infrastructure and allocated energy to our project. Combined, there's roughly about $400 million that have been invested in infrastructure. In just a few years, not only did the Quebec government make a significant return on equity on the mining side, but they generated close to $1 billion in taxes and revenue. So you can see that the investments that were made on the infrastructure side allowed us to invest over $2 billion in the Labrador Trough, but also allowed a whole lot of taxes and royalties to be collected by the government. We've got a project today that on paper has 15 years of life of mine, but we have decades of resources more in our portfolio. So the revenues will keep on coming for the next decades, and that investment is now behind the various government bodies.
If there's still time, if any other witnesses would like to
There actually isn't, but
No?
we'll come back to Mr. Danko. You'll probably get another chance. We're going to go on to Monsieur Simard. Allez-y.
Merci. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Can you hear me, gentlemen? I would like to go back to infrastructure. You know, I think that one of the challenges we're facing, I've discussed this with some representatives of your sector, is that infrastructure construction is really one of the main challenges you're facing. You need to get that material out after you get it out of the earth. and there could be a single contractor model, and many of you have a common interest. You can't pay for, let's say, new railway loops and connections. You've mentioned what you've done in this Sept-Îles region. That's wonderful. But I would like you to provide us with documents or give us more information about various models, various approaches to funding infrastructure, how it could be done, partly through the government, Indigenous communities as well, or they're involved. What sort of model could we use to create, for example, the rail loop connections that you've been mentioning, Mr. Cataford? You brought that up. So I'd like to hear you about various financial plans to provide infrastructure. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Simard. I will respond in English with your permission, but I certainly understand your question in French.
Infrastructure, just specifically in northwestern British Columbia, is the Indigenous participation, and as the capabilities of those nations and their ability to participate in large deals, as that has increased through organizations like FNFA, through the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. We've started to see, in the case of, say, the LNG project, Cedar LNG, that the Haisla Nation have taken a 51% stake in that project. Silisms is a Nishka-led project as well. And from an infrastructure on the transmission side, then the models that we've seen in Ontario, for example, the Wataynikaneyap, where it's 51% owned, Indigenous as well. And I suspect when we talk about the Northwest Transmission Line, the potential between the three phases, the North Coast Transmission Line, and then two additional phases, one of which may go to the Yukon, as my colleague, Mr. Singh, had raised, that those two would also be financed in partnership with nations who, again, are finding ways to access through financial First Nations Finance Authority, and then having the backup of other institutional investors that are getting very interested in that model. So je crois que ça c'est un aspect de la solution. Merci.
I think that will contribute to the solution. I understand you. At the federal level, at the provincial level as well, is there any mechanism available, and I don't really understand this area, of course, but is there something that would allow us to set up a projects office, the mandate of which would be to set in this type of infrastructure? I'm wondering how this would be set up, basically. You've told us about the railway loop, but there's also the Northern Corridor project, and I think, how will we set up to cover the interests of the mining companies and everyone else? So who's going to carry this ball, across the court?
Monsieur Simard, Mr. Singh has had his hand up. It's your time, of course, but if okay, Mr. Singh.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I can capture a little bit of Monsieur Simard's question as well. I think first thing I wanted to mention earlier is these are the best dollars that we can spend from an infrastructure perspective, from a Canadian perspective, all bias aside, putting all of our respective biases aside. These aren't handouts. It's just a question of timing. The challenge with trying to tie mining projects to infrastructure, even though when you think about the North, much of the infrastructure in the Canadian North stems from previous mining operations dragging, in some cases, infrastructure north that now is to the benefit of Canadians, of Indigenous groups, and from an Arctic sovereignty perspective. So I think, I would say, in a lot of ways, we can leave it up to the industry to promote what the financial mechanisms look like. What's required is, as you mentioned, kind of that coordination effort. How do we streamline? How do we manage the disconnect between permitting timelines for our projects that may not exactly coincide with the timelines where you need to build this infrastructure? How do we confirm to investors that it's worthwhile making the infrastructure investment, and then the projects will backfill on the financing side, on the return side? Because again, as we pointed out, our project alone is $60+ billion of GDP. You add things like Galore Creek, when the Yukon government and BC are talking about that Northwest transmission line, they're talking about almost $200 billion of GDP that can be unlocked. So I think it's coordination, as you point out. I think it's timing and bridging that gap such that those investments can be made. But I will restate that those investments are the best things we can be doing for ourselves as Canadians.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Very quickly, and we could get back to this, I would like to hear more about what you said about funding before 1990, the pension funds, as compared to how they could be used today. I haven't much time, but I could get back to that. I'd like to know whether you have checked with the Canada Growth Fund whether it would be possible to, I'm not sure if they've got a strategy for mining exploration and development. I know that there was something for carbon capture and storage, but, they're dealing in pension funds.
I think it's for you.
I guess the short answer is I'm not aware whether there is anything presently that's driving investment into the mining industry. Certainly not on the pension fund side.
Merci.
Okay. On to...
Thank you.
Allez-y.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Over to you, sir. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for being here with us today. Mr. Walensky, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Walensky. So I've been listening to you attentively, and my gosh, it's complicated, not easy to get a mining project up and going in Canada. I would like us to be ready to compete with the rest of the world because, critical minerals, they're to be found all over the planet. So I'm an investor. What would motivate me to come to Canada? So here's my question. What motivates you, given how difficult it is to get a project up and running? Is it the resource itself, the endowment itself that keeps you going?
So as somebody that drives investment into various countries, we very much are first off concerned with the geologic endowment. What is the likelihood of there being something that could be eventually economically mined? And Canada is very fortunate to have an abundance of mineral wealth. Secondly, we're looking for stability, and it's something that Canada obviously has. It's a wonderful jurisdiction. It's very difficult to find a place elsewhere around the world that you can put in a mine that is done socially, environmentally, and governmentally responsibly. The downside, of course, are those items that we've all been discussing. Lack of infrastructure, permitting delays, and those are the downside risks. And so all of those components play into the decision to invest. Clearly, Canada is a tier 1 destination with its challenges.
Alors, on a des richesses extraordinaires.
All right, so we have an extraordinarily rich endowment. That's what I'm hearing. And I think that we really have to deal with the regulations because these are endless delays. And if we don't deal with the regulations, if permits are given, but we're still not fast enough and all the rest of it. I mean, we've really got to do something because we hear this day in and day out, too much paperwork, too many delays, it costs too much to do that part of it. So we really have to address the regulations, basically. If we have to keep discussing this, but we get nowhere, I mean, we'll never become competitive. In Canada, yes, we want to keep our own resources, we want to process them, we want to be more autonomous, and so on. So, the regulations, we've just got to address this. Do you agree?
My mic hasn't come on, but yes.
OK.
Yes.
OK, c'est bien. Bon.
All right, good. Okay, so we've got some agreement on that. Now, we're waiting for C5 that's supposed to speed things up. Do you think it will? Do you have any hope?
Explorationist, so I'm in a high-risk profession, so I am an eternal optimist. So yes, I always have hope, but there's always more that can be done.
Selon vous, là, juste curieux, combien
So in your
d'argent
opinion, I just, curious to hear, how much money is Canada losing day in and day out, given that investors are deciding to invest elsewhere? I mean, you must have some idea. We must be losing a lot. It would be a good idea to hear these figures. We want to create wealth. We want money. We've got social programming we need to pay for. So at some point, you need to get rich. And we're losing how much money right now?
We're losing billions. I mean, as Mr. Singh has said, potentially one project in the Yukon has the ability to add billions to our economy. And in the Yukon, that one project would probably make up, I'm not even sure on the percentage, Mr. Singh can probably jump in and let me know, but a vast majority of that territory's tax revenue would come from a single mine, never mind having multiple mines. It really has the opportunity to dramatically stimulate the Canadian economy for the whole public's good.
Une minute, oui, Monsieur Catafort.
1 minute. Good. Mr. Catafort, and perhaps I can put a question to you. I would like to know, look, would you say that having natural resources so close to us, and by the way, having them accessible to a business, to a plant nearby, is essential to new development? I mean, you need energy sources, right? Okay, so the power sources, we hear this regularly, is natural gas, LNG, really for the power for the mines. Well, it depends on where we're operating. We are directly connected to the hydroelectric power grid, and most of the power we use is hydroelectric. So, okay, you can do that with hydroelectricity. So you must be pretty close to the source of power, yes? We are. But if you're at a distance from it, from the dams, I mean, I suppose we need to concentrate all this. We need to ensure that the power sources are near the extraction sites, yes? Well, it depends on the sector. In the trough, the Labrador Trough, it's so close to the hydroelectric power source that, yes, we do need some lines, but they don't have to be terribly long to allow us to use the power. And we use a good deal of that power from Churchill Falls or other such mines.
Mr. Singh, who looks like he has a response to your question. Mr. Singh.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to add. Look, generally speaking, and my colleague at Champion Ore is blessed by having hydropower close by. That's a clear advantage in Quebec. But generally speaking, our mines are not in industrial centers. They're in remote places, and oftentimes, especially in the north, we need to tie them with transmission. Our project works off of LNG. I think LNG has a place to play in providing the power to do the things we need to do. But certainly, as a country, we need to find and invest in power generation. We need to invest in power transmission. If we're going to open up these corridors and access these critical minerals, that is going to play a huge part in the next 30 years of our lives. I think, power generation and transmission will have the next 30 years that oil had for the last 30 years. So it's definitely a place we need to invest and focus.
Mr. Gay, 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur
6 minutes, Mr. Gay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us today and for answering our questions as well. Someone mentioned a little earlier the C5 bill, the Bill C5. It's now been carried, and it's legislation. It provides for many advantages for large projects. One review panel, a set period of time. The aim is 2 years to jump through all the hoops to start a project. Now, Of course, we know that would be for the major projects, designated projects, and each of your projects isn't necessarily one of those. However, going forward, the Prime Minister has announced in his list of potential future projects those that are producing critical minerals. If you read the left-hand column, that's one thing, but on the right, it's the column what we'll work on in the future. And there's a line item there, critical minerals, meaning that would, at least in theory, apply to each of you. And there, we hope to, at least the approach of C5 would be applied to critical minerals. So what's your view of that, and what advantages would that provide for you, and how can we ensure that would work for all of the critical mineral potential projects? I'm sure you've read C5 and you've thought about it and asked yourselves how it would apply to your projects, to your firm. And I'd like to know what your thoughts are. How are we going to be able to use C5 to do good work in your sector?
Je pourrais commencer pour celui-là, monsieur.
I'm happy to begin. Mr. Gay, thank you for the question.
So the province has been able to substitute their environmental assessments with the Impact Assessment Act. So that's a crucial starting point, such that we don't have overlap in terms of jurisdictions. The other thing, 2 years, if that includes ECCC's and the Schedule 2 and the Fisheries Act authorizations, because that's actually a very significant permitting requirement. If it includes that other work, then those can happen concurrently. Then that concurrent work is extremely important, certainly to stay within the 2 years, because the 2 years is ambitious. I think it's welcome news to investors and to multinationals operating in Canada. And then thirdly, as the response to C5 is one where, are these in our best interest from an Indigenous perspective, or these are overriding our rights, etc., you can see that we really need to engage the nations. And in the case of the Tahltan, as I've said, the shared decision-making and the work that the province has done to really strengthen the governance of the Tahltan central government has improved their perspective and their acceptance of natural resource development. So they see that natural resource development actually moves in parallel with reconciliation, where I don't think that that's the case elsewhere. So I think that there's a lot of work to do with respect to getting the nation in that position to be ready to work to advance resource development. Merci.
Je suis intéressé à chacun
Thank
d'entre
you.
vous.
I'd like to hear from each of you, please.
Je pense qu'il y a des axes qui peuvent être
I think that one of the axes we could make good use of is early planning by some levels of government. There are some specific sectors that are looking at multiple mines and projects. But if you think of an area such as the Labrador Trough, if work could be carried out ahead of time, if we know what conditions the area already meets, then we know that, yes, we can check off this element, that element. Then you could get permits even more quickly based on where you are. And we've seen that in other countries. It works well. Pretty well. It doesn't necessarily reduce the standards, but it just lines up quite well with what C5 is aiming for. Everything that could reduce dual work, that's one of the elements that adds to the complexity of assessment. And we certainly hope that we can reduce the time it takes to get a permit. Mr. Singh?
I would say it's a start. And it's an important start, and the comment was made that the Major Projects Office C5 streamlining these big projects is maybe meant for some of the larger projects, but they are also the more complex projects like ours. Have a big footprint. We need to walk through them carefully. We are advancing the largest project that the Yukon has ever seen, and so it makes sense to take that level of rigor and that complexity and handle it slightly differently. But hopefully, to your point, in time that will flow down to everyone's benefit. Everyone needs. We're not trying to make, and we're not asking to make this easy. It shouldn't be easy. We're just asking for it to be a little less hard and a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more efficient. And I think even that efficiency, oftentimes we find in our processes, it's not First Nations, it's not the Indigenous that are slowing down the process. It's departmental. It's different organizations asking similar questions and bogging things down or asking questions in phases that don't apply to them. So I think, honestly, just a layer of efficiency and discipline can go a long way. I think all that kind of flowing into the development of the Major Projects Office, I'm very optimistic about. Obviously, they have to get started and working. But if we can resource and fund those types of initiatives well, resource our departments so that they have the talent and the experience and the people to do the work that's required of them, that's really how we move things forward. We're not going backwards, I don't think, as a country, and throwing out our level of care for the environment and Indigenous, and nor should we. I think the mining sector has come a long way in the last couple decades. It's more about embedding efficiency and discipline and having the right people in the right seats to do the work.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. Monsieur Simon, 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Oh, very kind of you, Mr. Chair. I'll take them all. Thank you. Let me continue picking up on what Claude said, even though I'm not a fan of C5. Not at all, actually. But there are some mechanisms that could be used. I'm not sure if it's you, Mr. Cataford, or some other miner I discussed this with, who said you could simply moving the storing area to make it more efficient led you to have to look at the effects on fish species and so on, even if it was kilometers and kilometers away and so on. So you have a development plan that you need to work from. It would be interesting for the committee, and perhaps our analysts could provide us with information to this effect, but if I discover some copper, let's say, if my explorations lead to this discovery, how do I step-by-step move on that? On one side, you've got, I'm sure, the financing column, and on the other, you've got the standards. And we've been told, at least people have told me, that funding, before you even get to the point of feasibility studies, it's really very complex getting through that, and the governments don't support you, financially at least, to get through that feasibility study. You can't get funding for that. So several projects, I mean, someone told me, it's like going through the valley of death. You need funding to get through it, and you may not even get through it alive. You won't even get to the pre-feasibility study stage. So I would like to know how this is laid out. What are the steps you have to carry out, the loops you need to jump through, the hoops you need to jump through? I'm not sure whether you could provide us with something. I don't want to give you more work to do, of course, but perhaps you could provide the committee with a document kind of outlining the bare bones of what it looks like. One side, the funding you need to go look for, and on the other side, the standards you need to meet and the type of assessments you need to go through that you need the funding for to even get through those. So I certainly agree with Mr. Singh and so on that we need to respect environmental standards and social acceptability standards, but that said, there are certainly areas that the road could be made a little less rocky for you. So I'd like to hear you on everything you have to do to launch a project with the current standards. Each of you, please. Yes. Thank you for the question. You'll probably hear two different answers depending on whether you're speaking to a junior exploration company or to a company that's already up and running. We have both of those aspects. For example, our CAMI project, which is in Labrador, or along the edge of Labrador, it could provide about 9 million tons a year, and this would allow for 20% more production of high-purity iron in Canada. Now we're investing about $100 million. And that's what we've invested so far, and we still haven't pocketed the permit to go ahead with this project. So, yes, funding those steps at the outset is quite complex. Given that we're already up and operating in other areas, it's part of our growth budget, so we have the money to invest in that. But accessing the various critical minerals infrastructure funds would be advantageous. And, of course, high-purity iron ore, having it as a critical mineral would be helpful. Right now, that's not the case. We're trying to see to it that it becomes recognized as a critical mineral, high-purity iron. This would be very helpful. It would allow us to develop other resources as well. Okay, if you could do that, it would be really appreciated. I just want to see, like, a diagram. I want the committee to understand, like, on day one, you've discovered this iron ore potential mine and this deposit, and then what do you need to do, step by step? Let me go back now to what I was saying earlier about funding. I know, for having spoken about this with others, that there are some minerals on the critical minerals list, even though they're not covered by the fund or on the financial list for Canada. And, of course, we'll be able to discuss this with the Minister of Finance, I think, to find out why. But what interests me is something you said earlier about pension funds. And I wrote in 1990 there was a changeover. After 1990, there was a change in legislation. You say that from 90% investments, it went down to 25. I'd like you to tell us a bit more about that change.
The regulation around the investment of the pension funds changed progressively from 1990 through to 2005. And in 1990, 90% of their funds had to be invested within Canada. And that was reduced and reduced and reduced through to 2005 when there was no minimum amount that needed to be invested domestically.
Mais vous, est-ce que vous parlez d'une obligation?
But was this an obligation? They were obliged to invest in Canada, or was this about incentives to have them invest in specific types of projects, such as mining projects? Because I have no idea what happened between 1990 and 2025. Was it simply the requirement to invest in any Canadian project, or were there specific requirements having them invest in, let's say, mining?
It was just domestic projects. There was no specific in mining. They could have invested in real estate or any commodity.
So, Mr. Singh, if we could have a quick response from you. And
yeah, I was just going to add really quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Lancey's point here is very, very important. You know, I as a Canadian sometimes get offended as to how little our pension funds, our own funds, do get reinvested in our sector in Canada. Some of that is normal. We've tasked these people with securing our retirement futures. You know, they're making the best investment decisions they can. In some ways, they should be left to do that. But I do think there's an opportunity to do both. To allocate those funds smartly, but to do it in a way that benefits us as Canadians as well. They certainly seem to keep finding the mining sector a little bit too risky, but infrastructure, which we've all talked about, is a layup in terms of where we should allocate and marry those funds together. You know, the fact that infrastructure can then bring on the mining projects and make them easier to accomplish. I think it's a circle. It's a mutually beneficial kind of spiral, and that's one place I think we should spend some time and focus.
colleagues, thank you, Mr. Singh. Before we start our third round, we'll pause for 5 minutes, get a coffee, stretch. Witnesses, you can do the same, and we'll be back here at just before 25 after. Colleagues, if we could regather. All right, so colleagues, we have time for 2 rounds. We're going to have to reduce the time a little bit in the 4th round. I'm suggesting instead of 5 minutes, 4 minutes for each, and then Monsieur Simard 2 minutes instead of 2.5, and we should finish maybe just a little bit after 1, close to time. And we're going to start with Mr. Rowe. Mr. Rowe, you have 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Chad Ulansky. You mentioned about a lot of the minerals in Canada is away from the population. But what's interesting is I took a look at our critical minerals map, and a lot of the deposits that were found, and I think the key word is found, has been in areas where the population is, except for the Rockies. I'm curious if you can just kind of dive into that, why might that be and what we can do to fix it.
So the reason that is exploration is very high risk. And because of that, we tend to look for projects close to where there's infrastructure, where it's cheaper. And as a result, there's not many companies that are willing to go out to kind of those blank areas and look for resources. I'm fortunate or unfortunate to have spent a lot of time looking in those blank spaces and finding things that haven't been found before. And that's where a lot of the new discoveries are going to occur, because you're right. You take a look at the map of the mineral occurrences and you can see where all the infrastructure is because that's where people have explored. It's those blank areas in the map or where the new significant tier 1 discoveries are going to be made. And when we make them, we're going to need to have some guarantee that we'll be able to get some infrastructure built to them so that we can bring them to market.
So, and you talk about investment, and you say, the investment in infrastructure, and you said that investment has been more short-term focused now, perhaps more than ever, I think was kind of what you're alluding to. And I worked in the mining industry, and I've seen that. The mining industry, the investors, they seem like they'd rather make $1 today than $2 tomorrow. I'm just curious if you could elaborate on that and what perhaps we should be doing as a country to fix or motivate people to invest in the long term.
That's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for you as how to, produce that longer-term view on investment. And I think society in general is shorter-term. It's not just investment. Everybody's got a very, how long is a TikTok video? That's literally people's attention span at the moment.
I'd just jump in there, Mr. Rowe, just to talk about this particular region, northwestern British Columbia. It was really the target of when we acquired Newcrest in 2023. Newmont saw this region in northwestern British Columbia as a place we could do business for many generations to come, and we have people in our company looking 100 years down in terms of infrastructure needs and trying to understand how things are going to evolve here. So I think the first thing is that the transmission line and the road did bring those initial discoveries and have led to some of the first operations. So then adding in additional transmission and additional infrastructure, I think we'll do that as well. We've talked too about working with Indigenous, and I think that will be a really important component to solidifying the resource development and essentially how we can do that in combination and advance reconciliation at the same time. The other thing though is the geology, and so these ore bodies are ones that do have the copper gold porphyries that are large enough to sustain operations for 50 or more years. So we have a view at the Red Chris operation right now, for example, that you could operate there for another 50 years. And not every single type of deposit, and Chad and people that understand the geology better than I could detail that. But the short-termism, to going in and exploiting smaller deposits over short amounts of time don't set up well. But infrastructure and investments in workforce development and training, and really getting large companies in like ourselves with over 100 years of experience in the industry and bringing the expertise to the area can set up certain regions for significant critical mineral production over many, many years.
Mr. Rowe, Mr. Singh, I think, has a response for you, if that's all right with you. Mr. Singh.
Yeah, maybe just really quickly, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure it's much of a response, but I'll say it anyways. I think at the end of the day, we have to be good businesses, which we are. There's a lot of great Canadian companies doing good things in Canada. John, Chad, David, myself. We're not. We're reasonably resourceful. We have opportunities, and we've chosen to tackle the things we're tackling because we think they're great opportunities that can do good, provide a good for Canada and for our investors. So I think ultimately we're not going to change the world. We're not going to change how people invest. I think we have to have a product that they're compelled to want to invest in. And whilst there are, if I'm being an optimist like Chad was earlier, whilst there are places in the world where you can do this easier and maybe quicker, I much rather have a balanced approach that leads to a successful outcome in Canada, because once you are permitted in Canada, once you have a mine running in Canada, it's among the best places, if not the best place in the world to have it. And we've seen how you can go faster in other places. Panama was one example, and that mine got taken away 2 years into production. So I think it's about finding the balance. And right now, I'll admit, things are stacked against us a little bit in the mining sector, and anything that can be done that relieves that pressure and simplifies the process will go a long way. And the rest of it is on us to find those investment dollars, which we're all capable of doing.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. On to Mr. Hogan. 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you all for your time today. It's very valuable in helping the work of this committee as we work on our common goal of supercharging critical mineral development in Canada. Building off Mr. Martel, Mr. Simard's questions about capital, I want to ask about access to capital and how we draw capital to Canada. It's also been identified by earlier witnesses as the most essential component to the development of critical minerals. It's also one of the roles of the Major Project Office, helping projects access the capital they need. And as Mr. Gay was mentioning, critical minerals as a basket is one of the areas Major Projects Office is working on. So, I guess this. I want to assure Mr. Lansky first his comments about creating an overall improved regulatory environment are well heard. Something the Prime Minister himself has said will be a focus of this new government as we bring average timelines down. But one of the other complementary things I have heard would be that to access capital would be examples of projects going well and going quick in Canada that you could then point markets to show Canada's new government is living our time to build mantra. So my question then to the witnesses is your thoughts on that view, that case studies of Canada's new government's new approach would be helpful in accessing capital, and also when you look at it through that lens of speed, when you weight projects more heavily by speed, where do you think the opportunities are for Canada?
Mr. Cataford, go ahead.
Thanks for the question. So first, I think the importance of the critical minerals list was key, if you take our example, in attracting capital. So as soon as Canada, Newfoundland, and Quebec put high-grade iron ore on the list of critical minerals, which was welcome because it is essential to be able to decarbonize the steel industry, well, we were able to secure a partner, Nippon Steel and Sojitz, to commit to invest $2 billion in Newfoundland and Labrador to be able to develop the Kami project. Where we still have quite a potential issue is when we talk about the infrastructure side. Because as a mining company, our cost of capital is much more expensive than on the infrastructure side. If I just give you an example, if I go see a pension fund to be able to borrow money, if I borrow it as Champion Iron, it's going to cost me a whole lot more than if I borrow it as Infrastructure Co. X. So if we're able to separate the infrastructure side and be able to have that financed in a separate way and allow us to focus just the investor dollars on the actual mining side, I think that's one of the paths that we'll be able to attract more capital into the region for sure.
Any other witnesses want to weigh in on that? I see Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I would say, look, if you're talking about when can we access capital efficiently as a sector, if you're drilling and finding, if you're having success from a drill perspective, you'll find all kinds of capital. Money will come your way. If you're producing as well, producing effectively, there's capital, even if you probably don't need it at that point in time because you're in the cash flow side of your business. It's in the middle. It's in that trough that we often refer to, that permitting timeline where there's no, you're spending huge amounts of money on a relative basis, given the size of your company, and there's no assurance on timelines, and there's no assurance on success at the end of those timelines, which is fair enough. You have to do the work to prove that those projects should move forward. But I think having some success stories, being able to point to your comment about how the commentary at the top is actually funneling through the bureaucracy and leading to streamlining, that's where the rubber hits the road. If we can, I've had plenty of investors that say, well, you're talking about a multi-year permitting process. Well, come talk to us at the end of it. And that's the challenge. That's where we need to really, again, some bias, accept it, but that's where we need to kind of shorten that timeline. If we're going to attract capital to the mining sector, that's where it's more starved.
One example, Mr. Hogan, just in northwestern BC again, where Newmont has two operations, the capital decision is coming up relatively soon at the Red Chris mine, and it's one that was listed as to be designated on amongst the first five. And so the Bill C5, the major projects office, and the profile that's come to the Red Chris project since, along with the investment that was made in the road through the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund, and the financing that may be part of the designation with respect to the Clean Technology Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit. All of this I've seen a very significant impact on our board. Our board will be making the investment decision upwards of $4 billion Canadian in May, June next year. So I think these steps that are being taken are being noticed by a multinational like ours. So it has had a significant impact. Additional infrastructure, that next phase of projects in that region would require additional power. So a Galore Creek, for example, is not a feasible project without an increase enhancement to the transmission line, additional power up there. So that's the kind of thing that would serve to induce future capital decisions from a Newmont. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hogan. And if Mr. Olansky has a comment later, Mr. Hogan has another opportunity to ask that question. Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, je vais faire ça vite. Vous aviez pas répondu.
Thank you. I'll work quickly. You did not answer Mr. Ketterford earlier about funding, but I think that you were able to provide that information to one of my colleagues. So, if you want to please the government, you needn't ask for money. You could simply ask for regulatory change. That's what the government's there for. So let's imagine that you have as much power as my good friend Claude over there and that the minister's listening to you. What type of short-term regulatory changes would you ask for that would really affect your work, that would make it much easier for you to get shovels in the ground? Well, from our side, it's, of course, not just about asking for money. We're very proud of having made money for the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec. And when we participate in investing in the assets of the project, that already gets the ball rolling. It creates momentum. More capital and investments come in. So when we work properly, of course, the taxpayers will benefit. So that's a very positive effect of our projects. When it comes to regulation, though, we could change the way we work, taking more risk. If we could take more risk, and if everyone could take a little more risk to support projects, this could lead to a good return on investment. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Singh, perhaps? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Improving timelines.
Interesting and say we know the process that we're going down. I think that would be obviously it's what we're talking about when we're talking about streamlining permitting on the federal level. We have a different process in the Yukon that we are about to start on. But I think having some certainty that these timelines, which will stay long, actually have some endpoints to them, so that you can run your businesses accordingly. Because the worst thing that can happen is you start a process and you don't know where it ends.
Merci. Je veux faire la lumière sur quelque chose. Si j'ai pas suffisamment de temps, peut-être que dans l'autre ronde, on reviendra. Vous avez été nombreux à parler du crédit d'impôt sur les technologies propres. Ce que moi, je comprends, c'est que le
Excusez-moi. Traduction?
Ah. Excuse me. Yes, testing. Testing. Very well. Things are on. So many of you have brought up the tax credits on clean development. From what I understand, this does not currently apply to critical minerals. But you also brought up greenhouse gas reductions that are provided by high purity iron ore and copper as well at Glencore. You know, if they don't burn the scrap material, they produce less greenhouse gases. So is that something that could make you eligible for clean energy tax credits? Right now you've got nothing though, right?
Good time to note that any further detail you wanted to relate to the committee can be done by brief, and if you didn't have an opportunity to answer a question of one of the members, that's a good way to get information to the committee, to the analysts, and hopefully influence the final report. So one quick response, Mr. Mullally.
I could take that. Merci, Monsieur Simard, pour la question.
Thank you, Mr. Simard, for that question about the tax credits.
Investment tax credit, the threshold for copper is currently 90%. So in that case, most major copper deposits would not be eligible. So essentially, you'd make most of the copper in Canada not eligible for this particular tax credit. One that, as I mentioned, would be very instrumental and critical in terms of inducing major investments. I spoke about the copper gold porphyries in British Columbia and northwestern BC. That example I know very well, where the copper content is closer to 50%. So one of the ideas is to lower that threshold from 90 to 50%. That way, making many significant projects eligible, and in turn, inducing major investments into the sector.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mr. Tucker and then Mr. McKinnon, 5 minutes each, and that'll complete the third round. We'll go on to a reduced fourth round after that. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. And to our witnesses, actually, to Mr. Lulanski. I'm not sure how closely you follow other natural resources, but CBC reported on September 29th that Calgary's Imperial Oil announced it will eliminate 20% of its workforce, approximately 900 jobs, most of which are in Calgary. Are you aware of those reporting?
Yeah, I did hear that they were trying to minimize their costs.
Yes, and there's lots of costs that have been layered on by the Liberals.
Mr. President.
Would you agree that
Mr. President.
Oh, hang on. Is this a point of order?
Point of order.
Okay, what's your point of order?
I don't think this is pertinent to the study that we're on right now, so maybe Mr. Tucker can explain how it's relevant.
Yeah. Mr. Tucker? Absolutely. And Chair, can you just confirm that I still have 4 minutes and 30 seconds?
Yes, we stopped the time. Go ahead.
At what time?
You have 4 minutes and 22 seconds.
All right.
and we'll stop the time until you respond. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So we're hearing about how Liberal...
Okay, so I don't think it's a point of order. So, Mr. Tucker, please go on.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Chair. So we've heard how Liberal regulatory process of increased cost and Imperial Oil had to make the decisions they made. But we've heard a lot about C-69 and some of the disastrous anti-growth regulations that Liberals have layered on to Canadians. Would you agree that it would affect all natural resources, including mining?
Yeah, I believe that all delays to permitting that can be avoided should be avoided. So the increased complexity doesn't benefit industry.
And would you agree with the statement that, or were you, when you read that article and found out about what happened in Calgary, that would you be shocked and disappointed to see that Imperial Oil has laid off hundreds of employees, particularly as the company has record production and near record
Point
profits
of order,
from
Mr.
Canada?
Chair.
Would you?
Yes, Mr. Danko.
I mean, it's a matter of decorum. It's really unfair to ask our witnesses, none of who have any experience in the oil industry, questions about the oil industry.
Mr. Tucker, if you could relate it to the study we're involved in here, that I think would be appreciated by all. I think I know the point you're trying to make. You're obviously talking about the regulatory system, but if you could steer it back to critical minerals, I'd appreciate it.
Well, Chair, it is critical minerals, it's natural resources, and I would like actually to find out more about how this has hurt our natural sector region, but I think who really needs to hear about this is our MP Hogan, who represents Calgary, that has suffered all those hundreds of job losses, and I cede my time of 2 minutes over to Mr. Hogan to hopefully ask questions and learn how disastrous the Liberal policies have been in Canada.
Mr. Hogan, you can cede your time to one of your members, but not to a member on the other side, from my understanding. So, anyone want to take up Mr.
No, but
Tucker's
Chair,
time?
I would say that we have ceded time to other members of other parties in the past,
Yeah,
and Mr. Hogan it's your
Mr.
time
Hogan,
to use to hopefully learn a little bit more about.
Just let me consult with the clerk. Yeah, Mr. Hogan, if you'd like to respond.
Well, I appreciate that. The gift of time is welcome from Mr. Tucker, but and I'm happy to hear more about the views that the witnesses have on the regulatory framework, in particular, maybe expanding on my last round in terms of access to capital. And so are there things that you think the federal government should be focusing on that would increase access to capital and could be done, again, through that lens of speed? And what would allow us to, in a timely fashion, showcase Canada's new government's new approach to development and build Canada into the superpower we want it to be with critical minerals?
Anyone?
At the risk of repeating myself, I think the CTM-ITC, so the Clean Technology Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit, for the sake of some of these near-term critical mineral deposits, I think would go a long way in inducing some major investments, and then that would, again, I think strengthen the major projects office and their position, the work that they're doing. As I said, our board has taken note of the shift in terms of the role that critical minerals is intended to take here in Canada and with our economic growth agenda. So that one I think is very important.
Yeah, Mr. Singh, I believe, has a comment. Mr. Singh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I'm probably repeating myself as well, but I think I'm quite optimistic about the Major Projects Office and the role it can play from a debottlenecking perspective. That's where most of our challenges, at least, my view of where our challenges are. The other point I would say would be, increased emphasis on the federal government's responsibility to consult with First Nations and doing that earlier in the process and making sure those First Nations are funded. So those are kind of tactical things to do, maybe not overly sexy, but that's where the challenge is. The challenge is in the corners, and that's where we have to be incredibly more efficient to rise to the challenge.
Got 45 seconds.
That's great. Mr. Lansky, specific question is access to capital for exploration and juniors. Big companies come from small companies, and we need to be creating a robust ecosystem. What can we be doing specifically for companies of your size?
I would say continuing on with the flow through funds. That's critical for the junior mining space. And I'm going to go off topic a little bit, but quickly onto the First Nations side. Having First Nations as partner in resources is critical. I think we all are increasingly understanding the importance of having them at the table in a meaningful role.
Okay. Mr. McKinnon, 5 minutes to complete this round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe pointed out that most of our critical minerals were in the vicinity of where people live. I suspect that's because that's where the critical minerals are, and that's, the people came to access those minerals. But it makes me realize that 99% of this country is remote, and that we're always going to find a problem with infrastructure. So I was wondering, what can we do to be more effective in developing infrastructure in a timely manner? I'm going to start with Mr. Mullally. I'm interested in Red Crest Mine. I notice it's northwest British Columbia. I haven't been out there, but I know it's very, very remote. There's a main highway that goes up to Watson Lake, and Red Crest is quite well off that road. So what kind of infrastructure do you need up there specifically? And how can we structure things so that to make it easier to create infrastructure when and where we need it?
Thank you for the question, Mr. McKinnon. Yeah, so it's Red Chris is about 600 kilometers north of Terrace, and about 5 hours south from Whitehorse. So it is very, very, very remote. There is a road. One thing that the road shares both risks for communities, significant risk for communities, as well as significant risk for operations, because the road is not suitable necessarily for industrial traffic all the time, and so this as a very important artery for the region will be important for it to be safe for communities, for safe passage, along with more industrial traffic as well. We have the federal government made a $70 million investment in the province of British Columbia. British Columbia made a $120 million investment in that road. So road safety will be critical. Community infrastructure as well. So our philosophy is that we, as we operate and grow in a region, the surrounding communities should also benefit as well. And what the Tahltan communities of Biscuit, Telegraph Creek, and Dease Lake continue to have substandard outcomes in health and education. So it's roads, it's stores, it's clinics, and other things. And I think that as we look at this region as a major project of national interest, we'll need to really consider how we continue to increase the standard of living in these communities. In particular, we would expect that there would be more people living in that region as well. And then the transmission, required transmission really beyond this phase. As I said, we have a couple operating mines. There's another project, and then just thereafter, there would be no more projects. Because of the investment, essentially, will always be strained without infrastructure, in particular critical minerals that are highly energy intensive operations, so they really need to be connected to transmission lines. As an example, Galore Creek would be a roughly 300 megawatt load, so it's almost impossible that operation would be developed without a transmission line, and it would represent a 40% increase in Canada's copper production. Thank you.
So what can we do as a government to facilitate investment in the infrastructure?
Well, I think through the critical minerals infrastructure fund is one. Mr. McKinnon, I think looking at other ways to invest in this region, as again it's being looked at as a major project, as a project of national interest in Canada. So I think transmission, and BC Hydro is the proponent, and for British Columbia, potentially working with the Yukon as a connection point as well. So, I mean, I know that this is a big priority for BC, a significant priority for the Yukon as well. And that cross-territorial and provincial connection is one that would bring a lot of value in terms of Mr. Singh's project, along with many a copper gold project along the way. So investments in transmission would be a very important step.
Mr. Singh, I think, has got a response to your question, Mr. McKinnon. Mr. Singh?
Mr. Cataford, I believe, as
Yeah.
well. So.
Okay, we'll get to both of them. Yeah. Mr. Singh, and then who is next? And then Mr. Cataford. Quick responses, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And very quickly, all I'll say is and reemphasize that these are phenomenal infrastructure investments that we're talking about. People will step up to make them. They don't necessarily all need to be backed by the government. What needs to be done is there needs to be a streamlining of those. There needs to maybe be some capital on the front end. But bridging that gap, as I mentioned earlier, that the mining projects that are going to be the anchor tenants for some of those infrastructure investments are on the come, that they're not going to get blocked for the wrong reasons, that they're going to move through the process in a reasonable time frame. If we can do that, that money will flow.
Mr. Cataford,
Thank
quick
you.
one, please.
Yeah, thanks. And if we look at the various investments that are required, I think they're very large amounts when we talk about infrastructure. When we look at the current funds that are available, if we look just at our project, we could probably require all the funds in certain of these that were put in place. So I think one of the elements, and it touches a little bit to what Mr. Singh just said, is that investments for infrastructure can be there if there's support from the government, and it's also projects that are recognized in a sort of streamlined fashion. I think there's certain areas in Canada that are critical to focus on, Labrador Trough being one. I think our colleagues here have mentioned another, that can generate significant investments in the future. If you look at the Abitibi region, in the 1920s, it was not accessible. They built a rail, and now you have about 7 mines in the region, and you've been operating there for the past 100 years. So I think we've got certain regions that we can focus on that can generate a significant amount of revenue that could potentially allow to focus on other more remote areas that have critical minerals that are essential for Canada, but are maybe a little bit riskier.
Okay, colleagues, as we go to round 4, our final round, we're running late because of our pause and just allowing some additional responses by our amazing witnesses who we've worked over pretty hard over the last almost 2 hours. So we can take one of two approaches at the will of the committee. We can just do one round from each party, 4 minutes for the two parties and 2 minutes for Mr. Simard. Or we can do the full round with maybe 3 minutes each of 5 people. So just one from each party? Yeah. Sound good? Okay, so let's go, well, it'll be 4, 4, and 2. So, and starting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to our witnesses. After 21 years, I'm always amazed at the expertise we get at the table, and yet governments don't always follow, that excellent information. I want to go to you, Mr. Linsky, just for a second, because you did talk in your opening comments about uranium a little bit, and I don't think a lot of people understand or even probably know what it is. I'd like to know, where does uranium come from? I mean, I know you guys have got some opportunity in Yukon, but it's my understanding that uranium comes from Russia and China, not exactly two friendly countries. How much actually do they have of uranium, and why is uranium so important for as a critical mineral?
Yeah, so roughly 80 to 90% of the global germanium supply comes from Russia and China, and China has blocked all exports of germanium to the U.S. as a part of the ongoing dispute. Our Western sources, primarily the only Western source in North America at the moment, is coming from the Red Dog mine, which is owned by Teck, and that germanium is recovered down at the smelter in Trail. the Red Dog mine is actually scheduled to end production in 2031, so it's not that far away. And germanium is one of those critical metals that we're all discussing here today that's instrumental in a lot of our modern technologies. So, whether it's our fiber optics, computer chips, LEDs, and from the military perspective, it's necessary for our night vision goggles and such, and sensors. So it is critical. It's found with our zinc mineralization on our project, but it's something that we at the West desperately need to have a source in friendly hands.
I think one of the things I always find interesting is that we have this major projects officer, but office that would advance a project. Would this be one that would qualify for it?
I would like to believe so. Yeah, I mean,
has it qualified for it?
Not yet.
Okay, so I guess the other thing would be if we just dealt with legislation, regulations, like it's been talked about nonstop. It would benefit the whole mining industry. And we wouldn't need a major projects office. We could just fix the regs, fix the investment, fix the certainty, which make a huge difference not only for critical minerals, but for all mining in Canada.
I think everybody is on the same page in wanting to have responsible mining occur as quickly as possible. And I'd like to believe that all of us are working towards that end as efficiently as we possibly can.
Great. I've got 1 minute left. Do you agree with the system that we have? And it's been talked about, so I want you to recap it again. I mean, if we look at some of the incentives and streamlined processes in places like Australia and the U.S., once again, just the importance of why we need to do a better job because we're competing in a global economy with resources that can flow and capital that can flow, et cetera, et cetera. So you got 30 seconds left.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as we've all discussed, we're in a global environment. Capital flows to where it feels that it has the best chance of return, and Canada needs to compete. And there's a lot of strengths in Canada. We've got great mineral endowment. We've got amazing people. We've got stable government. There's still some shortcomings that we need to work on in terms of times for permits, but you can't replace having the minerals in the first place.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to Mr. Gay for 4, followed by Mr. Simard for 2, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. President. This question is for Mr. Cataford. Monsieur Cataford, vous avez parlé...
Mr. Cataford, you mentioned rail lines, railways, and a railway loop, and that this would be a game changer if that could be connected for you and for the Labrador Trough. What can the federal government do on the regulatory side or by providing investments to help with that for that specific project? Let's use that as an example. I think that the time back when railways owned the infrastructure is, that's in the past. So we want to de-risk our projects by providing infrastructure. We have this unique project in the Labrador Trough. We have 2 railways, 400 kilometers, that come into 2 ports that are 50 kilometers apart. And all we need is a connection up at the top, 25 kilometers. It's just a very small investment that's required, of course, reasonably speaking, but for a new railway, that's $7 to $8 million. But connecting 2 existing railways, 800 million. So we could double the capacity, transport capacity, railway transport in that region simply by connecting the loop. And I think there's a good opportunity there working with the 4 groups that each have a section of that railway that could be connected with a good project, bring in partners such as pension funds to provide the capitalization, and there we are.
To you, because your company has a lot of experience working with Indigenous people over many years and many different projects. And I'm interested in the lessons. So we talked about C5, we talked about consultation, but I sort of heard also Mr. Singh talk about resourcing for the First Nations. So talk to me about what are some of the things that we should focus, include, encourage, maybe templates that we should prepare in advance on how to work with the First Nation based on your lessons learned.
Sure. I think the strength of First Nations typically starts with good governance, the strong governance structure in our experience, and really finding ways to incorporate the nations in early stage studies for sure, but once into production from employment perspective. Business opportunities, working especially with development corporations. I think the Indigenous development corporations have come a long ways in many parts of the country and have significant benefits there, in particular because these development corporations often pay dividends to the communities and therefore are a credible source of revenue. I think we've also seen that governance, shared decision-making, and then in British Columbia, consent-based decision-making, that this can work, but it is a significant lift for the nations to essentially run parallel processes where they're statutory decision makers. I think that can work, but I think where the federal government needs to step in is to resource nations and to also ensure that natural resource development is proceeding at the same rate as community development is. It's hard for nations that are in regions where they see mining and companies prospering and where their own services are substandard. It's very difficult for them to support the projects. So our philosophy at Newmont again is that we will only continue to build and prosper at the same rate. So we've made significant investments in community development.
Thank you.
Mr.
Smart, wrapping up the morning and the afternoon.
Merci.
Thank you. I would have liked us to get into this. We won't have time. The processing and the value chain, unfortunately, we can't get into that. But if you have any information about that for us, I'd be interested in receiving it. So quickly now, you did answer, Mr. Catterford, to my colleague Claude about the railway loop. I think it's ArcelorMittal and Rio Tinto. That's what you're trying to link? Yes, it's a Rio Tinto, ArcelorMittal, 336 kilometers, and Quebec owns another 36 kilometers. Okay, we've got a problem where I'm from, Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, where the railway belongs to Rio Tinto, Roberval-Saguenay stretch, and sometimes it's a little difficult to come to agreements. And when you brought this up, I was wondering, perhaps this negotiation, it could lead to a mechanism, and we saw this in telecommunications, by the way, infrastructure belonging to Bell, and they had to come up with a mechanism to allow other telecommunication giants to use that network, that infrastructure. Is it difficult to reach agreements when the infrastructure belongs to a competitor? There are two different situations at issue. When a railway crosses through two provinces, it's under federal jurisdiction, and then it has to respect the Canadian Transport Act. It cannot turn down tonnage. But the Rio Tinto railway on the north coast, given that it goes through Labrador and Quebec, they can't keep us from using that. But the other part, it's 100% private and solely in Quebec, so they aren't obliged to take tonnage. Let's go back to the Saguenay, your example. That railway is solely under Quebec jurisdiction, so they're not required to take tonnage. Of course, having railways that are subject to the Canadian Transport Act is a positive element for us. I understand that you're speaking to a sovereigntist who doesn't necessarily see things the way you do. But anyway, there's surely mitigation methods that could be used.
Smart. And on behalf of the committee, thank you to our witnesses. You've really had a lot of time with us. It's been very, very valuable, robust questions, answers with much conviction. I know we've learned a lot, and appreciate you coming out to see us. Yes, let's show our appreciation. And again, anything you would like to provide to us in writing is welcome. I know our analysts have been writing feverishly and have captured some of the powerful thoughts you shared with us today. Colleagues, entertaining a motion to adjourn. Hearing no objections, we are adjourned.